Good morning. The Portuguese Registry for HCM is an initiative of the working group on myocardial and pericardial diseases of the Portuguese Society of Cardiology. This morning we have already heard lots about the classical features of registries, about how to collect data in registries, and also which are some of the predictors of success of a registry. Why a registry on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? Because this is a non-rare disease with disadvantages of the rare diseases, but without their benefits. Because there is a lot of rationale for investing in this disease. It is common. It is a common cause of sudden cardiac death. It's an important cause of heart failure and stroke. It's the paradigm of the opportunity to implement modern genetics into clinical medicine, and we think that creative strategies to alter the natural story of the disease may be possible. Clinical research priorities in this disease have already been determined, but what we see is that today's recommendations are perhaps still a bit in the Stone Age. We only have most observational studies, most single center or small number of center studies. Recommendations are, many of them based on clinical experience of experts, and outcome and prognostic studies in this disease will have to include a large number of patients in a long follow-up, which seems quite difficult in a disease with a prevalence of 1 to 500, which is often asymptomatic and with a low event rate in most cases. And what do we know about HCM in Portugal? We don't know a lot. We think the prevalence is 1 to 500 based in non-European data. We think that sudden cardiac death incidence is 1% a year. We don't know nothing about the use of best practice, the number of in-hospital practice. We don't know many things about outcomes. Thanks God we have our Italian friends to guide us and to help us. And of course the Portuguese registry will have lots of influence of the Italian registry. Even taking into account that 10 years is quite a lot in the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy roadmap. In these 10 years, genetic studies are much more frequent than 10 years ago. Now we have CMR, and we have tissue Doppler and speckle tracking echo to assess these patients. And also in management, we have now much more patients receiving ICDs for primary prevention, and we have alcohol septal ablation. We will have also the help of the Euro Observational Research Program on cardiomyopathies. And so with a little help from our friends, we're going to start the Portuguese registry for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The major aims of this registry, it intends to be a nationwide survey, collecting data, real-world data on epidemiological and socio-demographic features, trying to assess how it is done, the clinical and genetic diagnosis, not only of affected individuals, but also at-risk family members, which are the current standards for diagnosis, clinical follow-up, and genetic testing and counseling. We want to know a lot about how it is treated, not only and the consequences of the treatment, not only in terms of benefits, but also in complications. We want to know outcomes. It will be an observational study with a retrospective prospective design, multicentric volunteer. We intend to do 1 year enrollment period, and data will be stored in an electronic CRF and collected in the CNCDC. We will invite directly at least 55 cardiology departments of Portugal. We will do the indirect advertisement, as our Italian friends did. And in case of acceptance, each of the major investigators of each center will have access to a specific website, a user-friendly website for data entry. And after that, data will be centralized in Coimbra at the CNCDC. We will include hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients, older than 16 or 18, detected exclusively by echo or with association of genetical and the presence of left ventricular hypertrophy in echo. We also will include what we call hypertrophic cardiomyopathy carriers, which are genotype positive patients without the phenotype of hypertrophy, with or without early myocardial dysfunction by speckle tracking or tissue Doppler echocardiography. So patients, the included patients will be those followed in a specific center at the present time or in the past, including patients that died. And an important concept in this, it's the follow-up time, which is the time from the initial evaluation to death or to the last evaluation. We will exclude patients with secondary LVH and phenocopes, and of course we'll have CRF, which must not be too busy and too complicated. It will have to take less than 15 minutes to fulfill, but of course it cannot also be too easy, otherwise data will become obsolete and useless. And so of course we will have to it will have to include some details. So the executive committee will design the study protocol. We'll send it to the National Society of Cardiology for some aspects. The Portuguese Society of Cardiology will give it back to the executive committee, which will send it to participating centers, which will send data to the CNCDC in Coimbra. I think the major strengths of our registries will be its relevance and importance of the questions. It will have scientific credibility, and CRF will not be too easy, not too easy, neither too complicated. The major weaknesses will be its design and also the fact of being volunteer. The opportunities, of course, it will be a real-world reality on HCM in Portugal in all these topics. And the major threat I see, it's the lack of participation because it's a volunteer study, and perhaps the CRF some will be very incomplete or bad fulfilled. Besides this Portuguese registry, I would like to send some challenges to the European Working Group on myocardial and pericardial diseases, and also besides the EORP, I think we should start with new registries for selected HCM populations. For instance, European registries on specific subgroups such as ICD carriers and stage or genotype HCM, and also some European registries on specific pharmacologic trials. It's important to raise which clinical questions should be answered and which drugs should be tested. So thank you very much for your attention.